Hello, everyone. Welcome to Coffee Break. My name's Steve Barrett. I'm the editorial director of PR Week, and I'm delighted to be here with another edition. And we've got Dayna Adelman with us, who's the director for external affairs at Heineken USA. Dayna, welcome to the show. Really good to have you on board.
Thank you so much for having me. Great to see you, Steve.
Yeah, and you. So you're the person who really is called Adelman, because often the PR agency of the same name gets mispronounced, doesn't it, as that? But that is actually your...
That is actually correct. It's Adelman and not Edelman, but I've had many questions over the course of my career in PR about that.
I bet you have. Tell us a little bit about this first corporate communications campaign that Heineken's rolled out this week, because that's interesting. It's not about the brands, it's about Heineken, the company, but tell us a bit about it.
Absolutely. So Heineken USA this past Wednesday rolled out Behind the Label, first ever corp comms campaign, as you just said, Steve. For us, it's a really it's a milestone moment to be able to quite literally peel back the label behind the people, passion, and processes that make Heineken USA what it is. And I think so often, we do a great job of marketing our brands, the Heineken brand or Dos Equis brand, and all the other great beverages in our portfolio. But we sometimes forget about the people who all make it happen. And for us, this gives us that storytelling platform to be able to tell some of those rich stories, dive into our history, show the progress the industry has made, but also talk about some areas for opportunity as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you, let's say, take a company like Procter & Gamble, where you've got Procter & Gamble and then you've got their brands, branded house of brands. But in your case, Heineken is kind of in both of those baskets, isn't it? So how have you navigated that in terms of putting this campaign together?
Yeah, so it's a really great question. It's something we across the world as the Heineken company have always struggled with, because there is the Heineken company, Heineken being in all caps, and there's the Heineken brand. And there's so much more to the Heineken company than the flagship and hero brand Heineken. So for us, the way in which we went about doing it with this campaign is really making sure, of course, we use that corporate logo, but we know consumers and stakeholders don't necessarily know the difference. But we make sure that we're explaining in a way in which people understand, they're not going to see the next ad from one of our brands. We're really going to talk about industry-wide issues, company-wide challenges, company-based stories, to be able to help make that differentiation between this is an ad that you're seeing about a specific brand or a new product launch, and this is, a company trying to tell its story.
So obviously communication is all about now a mix of paid, earned, shared and owned, and it's not just earned media anymore for the PR folks. What channels and tools have you used to roll out this storytelling?
So primarily for this one, we're using LinkedIn and Twitter. Both have paid campaigns going behind them. And on top of that, we'll look at starting later this fall, LinkedIn Live. So a series of conversations that will take our first chapter of Behind the Label, which focuses on gender diversity within the alcohol beverage industry and brings together a group of thought leaders, both from within Heineken, but also across the industry, for a series of different conversations to keep it going. So those will kick off in early November, and we'll probably do about 3 to 4 over the course of the next few months.
And people are a lot more interested now about companies, aren't they? Both whether it's somewhere they want to work, whether it is as a consumer or whether it's as an investor, all sorts of stakeholders. So how are you, and people want businesses to be more purposeful, and we've seen the sort of statements on that, but they'll hold your feet to the fire on it. It has to be more than empty statements. So tell us a bit about how you're navigating those elements of the Heineken brand story.
Sure. So with every campaign, whether it be for brand or corporation, you need to understand who you're communicating to, right? And each audience needs different information. So that was no different when we started to tackle this project. I think one of the reasons why we decided to start with gender diversity, it is such a meaty topic, particularly in what's traditionally been a male-dominated industry. And what we've been very transparent about is, how it links to some of the goals of the company. The global company, as part of our Brew a Better World agenda, we have a goal of hitting 30% women in senior leadership positions by 2025 and 40% by 2030. So if we're going to put out those commitments, we should be able to do a little bit of storytelling behind that too. And target that to specific audiences and divvy up that information in a way in which it will resonate.
How do you demonstrate purpose in an authentic fashion and not sort of come over as just paying lip service to it? How does that work at Heineken?
You really need to walk the talk. We have the first ever female CEO of one of the big brewers in the US, Maggie Taimany, who is a fantastic leader. And again, that's why gender diversity was a natural place for us to start, because we are actually turning the tide. And Maggie's been with the organization a long time. She started in the US, but had a brilliant career around the world with Heineken and came back in 2018 to lead the company. But in addition to that, we started a women's leadership forum over a decade ago here at Heineken USA. And so that's something we've been very proud of, because it shows that we're actually trying to make change instead of, preaching about something that we're not doing behind the scenes. And I think that makes the difference. You actually have to have the roots there, and then you talk about it versus talking about something that doesn't exist.
We can hear a bit of the New York soundtrack in the background there. So you're still working from home.
I am.
The Heineken office is in White Plains, I think. So normally you'd be commuting out there. Tell us a bit about how it's been for the past 18 months in terms of being part of a communications team and working remotely and sort of facing all those challenges.
It has been a wild ride, I will tell you that. And I'm sure all my peers in the industry would agree. I would say I'm fortunate to be on our company's task force, to be able to help jump in from the early days and help really lead from a crisis perspective. One thing that was really important to us early on was communicating fast and frequently with our employees and with our external stakeholders as necessary. But really, it was employees first from day one. And my role, both playing on the corporate and the brand side of communications here at Heineken USA, gave me the ability to also work with our brand teams to figure out in those early days, how do we lift and shift and pivot and really do some impactful work at a time when I think everyone, there was no playbook for it. Everyone was kind of up in arms, and we kept calm and we took a breath and we did what we needed to do. And I think last summer, great insight with our Dos Equis brand, we knew that over the summertime, people wanted to get outside. They wanted to be with their friends, but it was a scary period. How do we do that? We introduced the Dos Equis 6-foot cooler. And so, the campaign, you had a friend on each side of the 6 feet. It supported the 6 feet guidance from the CDC to stay apart. And there you go. We were able to insert one of our brands in a relevant way into the conversation and keep the product top of mind during what was a really scary time for all of us.
It was, yeah. What other trends did you see during that time? I think people were drinking just as much as ever, if not more. I know I was, but they were drinking in different ways. Obviously, they weren't going to bars. They weren't necessarily going to restaurants. They were ordering in a lot more. So how did that change your communications, and what trends did you see? The other thing we saw was a massive move toward hard seltzer, which is not necessarily pandemic driven, but it's maybe more of a generational thing. And I think you've launched a brand in that sector too. So tell us a bit about those things.
Absolutely. So it was a really interesting time to follow the trends and to do a lot of social listening to see what was going on the ground with our consumers. We saw everything from, the pantry loading, where people panicked in the beginning and they really shifted from, okay, I can't go out to that bar with a friend, but I can shop in my grocery store, my convenience store. And, we were prepared from a supply chain perspective on the ground to be able to meet those needs as best as possible. What was really interesting for us, we saw, consumer behavior continuing to shift throughout this time. Heineken 0.0 is our alcohol-free beverage, and that had been doing really well since introduced in the market in 2019, but we saw it flying last year. And, it actually gave us, without the ability to sample, the ability to get more creative. So how do we actually get the product into the hands of those who are sitting at home? We partnered with HelloFresh and got it into meal kits. We also, instead of, doing our normal sponsorships with the Tribeca Film Festival, we made sure that when they shifted to drive-in movies, we could be there as well, because as we like to say with this brand, now you can, because there's no alcohol in it. So we were finding different ways to still get and meet the consumers and get their needs. And then you bring up a good point about just overall shift in consumer palate. We've seen hard seltzer on the rise for many years now. We did just launch this past summer season Arizona Hard Seltzer, Arizona Sunrise Hard Seltzer, which is a great partnership with our friends at Arizona Beverage Company. We were able to enter that space. We're doing a ton of innovation outside of hard seltzer as well, even off some of our core brands. So with Dos Equis, have a Dos Equis Ranch Water, which is a popular drink that started in Texas and is now exploding across the US, as well as, Dos Equis Lime and Salt, and the list could go on and on. So we definitely didn't sit idle over that time. We took it as a way to advance and become more nimble and agile in creative ways. And going back to Ranch Water, I think from the time that was concepted here at Heineken USA until the time it hit the market, it was the fastest product ever to get out there. So it definitely pushed us to do things differently and for the better.
Yeah, it's an interesting trend, that for sure. Now, you're very associated with soccer, or football as I call it, and that was in June, actually watching the games in bars when we thought we were through this thing. I saw many Heineken sampler representatives in the bars, and of course there was the famous incident with Ronaldo at the press conference where he sort of looked at the beer and he put it down, didn't he? And then Paul Pogba, who's a Muslim and doesn't drink, he also took that off the table. How did you respond to that, and how did you react? Are you going to have to sort of tweak the way you do those press conferences, or whereas actually it was funny. Was it the Scottish player or the Irish player was like, yeah, but it's beer, great, So there was some fun to be had with it as well. How are you going to? How have you responded to that from a communications point of view?
Yeah. I think that was an eye-opening moment for many, not only within the company, but around the world. What does that mean for sponsors and endorsements moving forward? Because, of course, our sponsorship was not with the players. So how does that work moving forward? And, it's a great question. It's one that I know the team in Amsterdam is working hard on as the owner of those sponsorships. But what we came out and said a few months back, and what we'll continue to say as a beverage company, a portfolio company with many options, alcoholic, non-alcoholic, we just have to respect everyone's individual decisions. And, you take what gets thrown at you and you learn from it and you figure out how to adjust for the future and you move on.
Yeah, well, they were certainly talking about your brand. So if you believe the old adage about these good publicists.
Exactly.
Where are we, just to finish off, where
Sure.
are we going now with beer trends, with, as we gradually come out of the lockdown, as we sort of get back to going to sporting events, the US Open this week's been full, every day. Obviously there's still a lot to go through till we're fully back to normal. What do you see around, the next 6 to 12 months? What sort of trends do you see?
I see brands actually playing a big role in helping sport come back. We're a big sponsor of the US Open. I was there last night, and it was just such an uplifting feeling to see not only, our portfolio around, but Mercedes and all the other great brands associated with the Open live and in person, and working hand in hand on the ground with those who are regulating to make sure, there are the vaccine checks, there are whatever rules and regulations in place that make it safe for right now to come back. What I can tell you for now is, we all want to say we're betting on a full return. When that will be, we don't know. We'll be ready for it. And in the meantime, we're happy to, be on the leading edge or cutting edge, if you will, of helping to figure out how to make that happen.
Well, good luck with that, Dayna. It's been great to chat to you, find out more about your corporate campaign and your brands, and wish you well and look forward to meeting up in person in the future. Thanks for joining us on Coffee Break.
Thank you so much for having me.
No worries.